Hi, I'm Andrew Buttery from Melbourne Blender Society, and welcome to Blender World Meetup Day 2016. You may notice that this doesn't actually look like much of a meeting, and that's unfortunately because we lost our venue at the last second. So we couldn't get another venue and we couldn't get other people together, unfortunately. So it's just going to be me today. So I'm on for the next couple of hours, I believe.
And me.
What I thought I would do is, and David Andrade is here as well. Yeah, nothing like a bit of a blender to get started. So we'll add where is it? Text. So the hashtag World Blender Meetup Day 2016. So there you have it. If you are wanting to ask a question about what we're presenting or what we're doing, then that is the tag to use. So, and I will just have a quick tweet to that to say, so if you can see it. So, World Blender Meetup Day 2016 has started. Woohoo! Woohoo! And we'll try and keep it a bit more exciting than watching people type stuff into their iPad. So, so there we have it. Now, so what we're going to talk about today is a couple of things. Is the promo that you just saw, and hopefully you enjoyed. And also the other thing that we're going to do is to actually create it was done in Blender, but I used a number of different network rendering solutions to actually get it done in time. So the actual full render that you would have just seen at the end, I'll just play it again just so you can see what we're up to. This was put together over about 3-week part-time. I actually have a day job, which is quite intensive. So this was done in early mornings and in evenings to try and get it over the line. There we are. And as such, I have a few tricks and bits and pieces to actually make it happen. So with that. So just to start with a couple of thank yous. You can see that the world model was done by Leon Chung, which came from BlendSwap. The font was Airstream NF Regular by Nick Curtis from 1001 Fonts. The very beautiful purple background space sky came from the latest upgrade that was released for Pro Lighting Skies from Andrew Price's Blender Guru. He brought out a whole bunch of space sort of nebulas and so on. It's very pretty. And the last thank you is to RenderStreet, who actually I kicked this off at 1:30 p.m. today, and despite a few little technical hiccups, we managed to get through, and it basically finished rendering about 6, downloading by about 6:30, and I got it all put together about 6:45. 15 minutes to spare, no stress at all. But let's start at the beginning. So right back to the beginning. And I'll just make that a little smaller. So you can see pretty much what the camera sees. Yep. You can't see the actual globe at the moment. And the reason why is that I have changed what's called the draw type here. And that's under the object context. And you can see I can actually change it here. So if I'm using solid, it's a bit painful because then you can't see what's going on inside the sphere. Even wire still looks it's a bit hard to see, so I've just been using bounds for most of the time. The only time I did actually have it in solid is when I've been trying to do what are called intersection tests. So as the Blender piece floats around, I can basically put it back to solid and then play. And just make sure, okay, it's not intersecting, it's not going through the glass, that's all looking good. So it's a useful trick. So when you're playing, before you render your animation, make sure that you haven't got any intersection happening. The next bit, let's go right back here. So these plasma bolts. Now the plasma bolts are actually quite pretty, and I'll show you some examples of them. So they start out, they sort of fade in to begin with, as you can see there. Then they're fairly small, and so they're sort of like plasma around the center. And then they evolve right out to the edges of the sphere, like that. So, and there are actually quite a few different techniques in making that happen. So, starting with, let me just put that back over there. So the actual, if we look at the actual item in question and move the animation, you'll see that they basically zap around all over the place. But the construction of them is made through a series of 4 modifiers. So you can see here. So we have, if I turn them all off, let's turn them all off. This is what you're left with. It's just literally a line of vertices. It's only 5 vertices. That's it. Nothing to it. The first step is to then turn on the subsurf. So now it becomes a nice kind of smooth segmented thing. This is line. The next step is to then put on a displace. And this uses a texture. We're just using a straight cloud texture here with a couple of basically settings all modified. But it's very simple. And you'll also notice that I've added a couple other bits and pieces. One is it's driven by an object, which is called this new bolt empty. So if I go find, where is it? New bolt empty. There it is. So what you'll find is if I grab that and move it, where are you? There you are. That should be, I haven't got it turned on, that's why. So you now start getting this lovely sort of stringiness to it. And if I choose the empty, that's a bit hard to see. Let's have a look. Which layer is it on? It's on that one. There we are. And I'll just hide them. So now when I move the empty, you'll see that it basically just changes shape and creates that kind of plasma-y, flowy kind of feel to it. So that's what the displace does, and it's driven by the bolt empty, so I can animate that over time. And the other thing is also got a vertex group, because what I want is that the endpoints, so this one and this one, to not actually move that much. So I've basically, there's a vertex group is just the 3 center vertices. So they move around and the endpoints stay pretty much where they're supposed to. Because of the subsurf, they do tend to move a little bit. Then the skin modifier to give it actually some shape, as you can see. It's very squarish, and I wanted something a bit more fluid. That might be suitable for a lightning bolt. But for me, I wanted it to be a bit smoother, so then I added another subsurf on the end. And that came up with quite a good result. And that's interesting. And that's how we got the shape. Now, so that's how the actual shape was constructed. And by moving the empty, it drives the texture displacement, which causes it to then loop around back and forth. So that's sort of step 1. The second thing is, that's the basic construction. Getting it to fade up and the actual colors itself. So what we might do is I'll just set up a little, that was the wrong one. That was Shift B. What I want is Control B, and then we'll actually do a little render. There we are. So you can see they get this lovely kind of plasma-y glow to it. And you can actually see the shader down here below where we have, just ignore this bit for the moment. It's very simple that you have the emission, which is basically the light, and a transparency. And it's driven out of this node called layer weight and the Fresnel setting. Now, if I understand it correctly, the more oblique, or the sharper the angle you are viewing the object, it will go from a value of, it goes to a value of 1. And if it's perpendicular to the camera, like the surface, it's a value of 0. So in this case, what that causes is when you're looking at the center of the bolt here, which is dead on to the camera, it's clear, but the edges are where the light comes off. So it gives it that kind of plasma-y glow. This was just trial and error to get that effect. So that's how I got that lovely effect. The other thing is, if I look at one of the pictures, where are we? There's another one like this. You'll notice that it is actually blurred. There's motion blur on it as well, and that causes a little bit more of that effect to make it more sort of gaseous and ephemeral, shall we say. So you might ask, well, what's all this bit about here then? So to get the fade up effect is that I've actually keyed the transparency of it so that as I move back, that's interesting. I know why. You'll see that it's disappeared. And the reason why it's disappeared is because of this mix shader here. So at the moment, it's totally transparent. But as I move up, you'll see it starts becoming, just move it back a little bit. No, that's totally transparent. Where are we? Somewhere in there. Okay, so it's starting to become less transparent and appear. So that way it kind of, it fades up. So you start getting these kind of, so it's starting to just come into existence as such there. The last thing I wanted to do is actually make it sort of start small and then get larger so that we come right out to the edges of the ball and as such. And to do that, I actually added the last thing, which is a shape key. So at the moment, it starts right in the center where it's very small. And then over time, the shape key causes it to grow out to its maximum size. So again, it was just shape keying the shape of it out. And so at the end, you get something that looks like this. And then I just copied it 3 times and rotated them around a bit randomly and changed the axis that was driving the actual texture, the displacement texture. And so that way I got my 3 different sort of streams. So that's pretty much how I did that. So that was step 1. That was actually one of the last things I did. I actually focused more on the movement first because that was more important than having a pretty opening. Apologies if I've just offended anyone who says, no, it's got to be very pretty. So that was kind of first bit I wanted to show you. The next bit is, now you'll notice we have a little Blender logo floating around here. And again, we just keyed his visibility. So you can see it here. So even though it is appearing in the viewport, it's not appearing in the render. So that way it would not appear. Again, saves, if you take it out of the render, saves your render time, so on. And it's a good idea just to do it. And there we are. And it just pops into existence and it scales up slightly just to give it a little bit more of a nice feel. Now, you'll notice it's kind of floating about as well. And the way I did that was to use what's called an animation modifier. So let me just go out of here. Oh, just before I go, there is an awesome add-on by Greg Zile called Matalog. You can get it from his site called Adaptive Samples. and it just allows you to, it creates this like a list of your materials here. So if you want to find them, edit them, do stuff with them, very easy, very quick, very great little free add-on. So highly recommend it. So moving on, we'll go to the graph editor. So, and what on the graph editor, what you can do is you can actually add what are called animation modifiers. So it's a bit hard because it's very subtle, because if I turn it up, say I make the strength 1, you can start to see how it's causing this is the noise modifier. And if I turn the scale down to 1 and the strength up to say 3, you can see how it actually modifies the actual position of the object. I am not moving the actual center here at all. It does not move. The only thing that's driving its circular movement is this noise modifier and then this sign modifier below it. So between the two of them, and I've got one on the X axis and one on the Z axis, and they're slightly different to give a kind of vague, kind of floaty feel to it. And again, that was the only thing is with animation modifiers, you have to have at least one keyframe. Otherwise, you don't get anything here in the spline editor, and therefore you can't actually add modifiers to it. The other thing is you can't drive modifiers because of the order in which things are assessed in, I think it's the desk graph, I think it's called. So it's a bit of a shame because there are times I'd really love to drive modifiers, animation modifiers, and I can't do it. And I don't know if that's ever going to be fixed. It might just be the way it is. So that was very simply so that, well, because we've turned the this up, you'll notice that it's now just going all over the shop. So let's just get rid of that. Put it back. I think we're pretty much back to where we were. Yeah, so now we just get a nice kind of floaty feel to it. And that's how I did, so that's how I did the floaty blend a bit. And I showed you how I checked that it didn't go through the glass beforehand. So that's step 2. Now, step 3 is this thing, the camera and the camera movement and the nightmare I had trying to get this thing to work nicely. Because what I wanted it to do, I wanted the camera to follow a path, as you can see the path here, that sort of spirals around the world and pulls out to its final position where you can actually, sorry, that's the camera path. That's an old path. I should hide that. Comes out to its final position here where it's looking back at the world. This drove me batty because getting the timing right on moving, it's using what's called a follow path constraint. Sorry. The first time I did this, it was using a follow path constraint. And what happened was that if you use the follow path constraint here, you have options to have it follow the curve radius and do other things. And what happens is that causes the camera to bank and tilt and other things. And I didn't want that. I wanted to stay dead level the whole way through, pointing pretty much straight ahead or straight out. But at the same time, as it moved around, I wanted it to point to the center of the world. I didn't want it sort of flying off anywhere. So what I did is I set up an empty, which is called camera target, which is there. And then I got the camera and I said, right, I'm going to make it follow this path. And then I'm going to get the empty camera path empty to copy, where was it? Sorry, the camera target, to copy the location of the camera. And that worked fine on my computer. It worked really, really well. However, when I sent it up to SheepIt to render, it completely broke. And it's to do with the way, I believe it's Windows does it one way, Linux does it a different way. and I think that's part of the problem. If I understand it correctly, there is a thing called a transformation matrix, whereby it has the X, Y, and Z location, the rotation, all this good stuff here. And what happens is that is, as part of the process of determining where everything is in each frame, it will do an update on each of those. And constraints effectively affect these. They overwrite the natural values. The problem we had is that even though the camera was effectively using the rotation constraint to look at the empty, and the empty was using a location constraint to determine its position in Z, even though it resolved itself on my computer, on SheepIt's render farm, it had a conniptions, and the camera position wasn't actually updated correctly. So I started looking at completely the wrong things. And again, thanks to Soren at RenderStreet, because I thought, oh, maybe it's just a SheepIt thing. I tried it on RenderStreet as well, and again, it didn't work. Soren actually came up with a solution that involved a script, but there is actually an easier way when you've got two objects that you want to sort of track and follow, but not actually overwrite each other's matrices. So what we did is I set up this camera path empty. So this is like a third party, and it follows the path. The camera then copies the location of the camera path empty, while the camera target, oops, sorry, the camera, that's it, copies the location of the camera path empty, and then looks at the camera target. Meanwhile, the camera target copies the Z value of the camera path empty. So the camera can now look at the camera target without with both of the two constraints without overriding each other, and now it works. And you get this effect. So that's how I managed to get it to work. And this is one of the things that you find when dealing with render farms, is that sometimes you get stuff that happens that doesn't match up with what you've got on your own machine. So it's always a good idea to do a little test render. So we might just put a few things back. There we are. And we'll just make this hide controllers so it looks a little prettier. So you can see what's going on. Actually, yeah. The last bit I want to do, we've done the camera tracking. The last thing I want to do now before we try and get onto the network rendering piece is actually, just let me just check, see if there's any questions on Twitter. Nope. Okay, good. Any other question? No other questions at the moment? Okay. Is just the writing. The writing's pretty easy. So all it does is that each one has a path that it follows. So if I turn them off, you can see that each beat of writing has a path. All I've done is basically worked out, well, the cameras, you can see the camera is there. So I need to have the writing in place. So to just tweak it, rotate Z on the path, and you can see I can make it move into the frame a bit earlier or after. And again, it's just basically it follows a path. It's very, very, very simple. The only thing I didn't do is actually make it curve to the path. It actually does just copy the path location. And then it's just a matter of getting all the timing right on the movements. And that was pretty much it. I also got them to fade in and out using the same trick I used for the bolts. So I keyframed their transparency in the actual material. So that meant I actually needed to have material for each of the three different. So you can see I have a Europe one because the timing of their fade out is different. So again, what you are seeing here does not match what's happening up on the viewport. I'm keying them in and out of the viewport just to get them out of the way. That's it. They were actually pretty simple. It was just a matter of getting the timing right. That's all. So Last thing is the actual. You'll notice they all have a lovely glow on them, which is again a very simple trick, which we know and love. So there we are. You can see it's got a lovely sort of yellowish glow on it at the end, and that's a very simple here in the Compositor. Sorry, it's a bit messy. There are ways to tidy it up, but I didn't have time. So, what you have here is that you have, okay, what's called an ID mask. So let's try and think what's the best way to do this. Maybe I'll use. Can't remember what material number 7. Yeah, I remember what material number 7 is now. That's actually the glow on the lights here. So if I just look at, that's what the ID mask for that material looks like. So you can see I've got the actual material here. You'll see here I've got pass index 7. So this means that this material has ID 7. Then in the render layers, I tell it, I want you to have the material index as part of the output of the render. And then you can actually see it here. Let me just zoom in. You can see we have the index MA come out here. So this effectively creates a matte based on that material index. So that material index here. So if we go down here, that's it, material index 7. So it then appears as basically just the lamps pretty much. Then we just do an add. Doesn't actually, because it's a good question. I don't know why I've got that there. It's probably serving some good reason, I hope. Then we have a blur, which basically just blurs the actual shape so that you get this lovely blur. I know why the add is there. It's so you can add some, if you want to tint it, you can actually tint it. You can tint the color that you're actually going to put in, but at the moment it's just dead white. And then it is re-merged with the rest of the image. So it's overlaid. In this case, it's added over the top of the image to get the glow around the lights. So that's how I did a very simple glow. And for most people who have done any kind of compositing, it's just like Compositing 101. But if you haven't done it before, it's a very simple little trick to add that lovely glow to things. You can use it. You can also do it. That's a material index. You can also do it by object as well. Again, you get your pass index here. And then you use the render object index here. And you'll see that the object index is coming out there, though I'm not using it. So that's how you get a nice sort of glow, a very simple, cheap glow. Okay, so that's pretty much all the trips at that. Long day. Tips and tricks. Tips and tricks that I used just sort of to put everything together. And that's really is, there is very little, there's a little bit of tweaking of the color at the end and that's it. So virtually nothing. So what we'll do is let's go into how we actually did the network rendering. So what we're going to do is I'll just do something very quickly here. So we'll just do a very quick animation. There we are. Very, very simple. We'll make it Blender render. So that means it'll go quicker. I'll just add a little bit of, where are we? Extrude. Add a little bit of weight. How's that look? There we are. Cool. Let's add just a little bit more character to it, what we'll do is, where is, now this is me trying something for the first time on live to air, so apologies if this goes horribly wrong. So we have a value called shear here. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually, I'll just go back to the start, put that in there. I'll use the up. I'm using up and down keys to go to the next keyframe. Then what we're going to do is go back about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about there. I'm hitting the I key just to, when I hover over it, hit the I key to insert keyframe. Then we'll go here and we'll make that -0.4. Oh no, let's push it. Let's really push it. There we are. That's one of the things that I keep getting told in my own animations. I never push things far enough. So what have we got? That's about 8 frames. So we'll go another 4 frames. We'll come back 0.3, and then we'll go another 1, 2, 3, 4. Go -0.1, and then 1, 2, 0. Okay, so let's play that and see how it looks. Yeah, it's not quite right, is it? My guess is the reason why is because it's actually coming to a stop there when it should actually flow all the way through. And that we can fix pretty easily in the spline editor. So, so it's the shear value, as you can see here. So it's actually coming to a halt. Where is it coming to a halt? So let's just then they're going to there. We go what we want. I think we need something more like, is that going to solve it? Yeah, it's a little better. Okay, I think what we need to do is actually get our X location. Is it an X or is it Y? No, it's X. I can tell it's X there. Get our X location and change our, let's make this a little more. There we are. I'll show you another trick as well, just quickly. When you're doing something like this and you're only working on a small part of an animation, there is a feature called preview. So it's this little button here. And what you can do is you can define, I'm hitting the P button, you can define a range. And when you do that, it will only play that section. So handy little trick if you just want to work in a subsection of your animation. If you're interested, on my website, Blender Training, I've got a whole how it works, how to use it, and everything. So that's not looking too bad, I reckon. So let's actually let's render it in cycles. Why not? So
oh man,
that's it. Let's give it a very look. Let's make it diffuse. Let's give it a kind of a little bit of a yellowy color. Let's do some, let's have a quick, we'll just do a quick look. The lighting is crap. So let's just, no, let's not do that. In fact, let's not do any of this. I'm going out way too far. All I'll do is we will take it, we will make this really simple.
There you go.
We will make it, really, really simple. We will hit shadeless and we will render. There we are, done. Now, if you want to make really quick text, that's the way to do it. The only thing, we will take the background. Or actually, I think maybe we should insert plain we'll have a horizon. Let's make it sort of in keeping with our theme of sort of a bluey purple. How's that looking? Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, that'll do. Right. Okay, let's not mess around any longer. Except, whoop, actually, yeah, I do need to save it before I make a mess. So let's create a new directory called quick text. Okay. And well, Blender meetup today. 2016 quick text B1. There we are. Oh, that's just create another directory. Awesome. There we are. Okay. I want to add motion blur, but I'm going to stop myself because otherwise we'll be here for a while. Okay, so we have this lovely little animation. So I'll just turn that off. We'll just play the whole thing. Looks pretty good. Yeah. Hey, we could still do some work on the motion, but that'll do. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fire up SheepIt. So SheepIt is a free render farm. Now, it uses Java. So I think, yeah. Yes, I could do it too. I just got a suggestion from Qualism to do an OpenGL render with matcap. Yes, that would make it look very pretty very quickly. But we're trying to demonstrate something here. So next year, Qualism, next year you can present on OpenGL with matcap. How does that sound? So now SheepIt is a free render farm. There's a couple of different render farms out there. There used to be one called renderfarm.fi that was kind of one of the first free ones. And unfortunately, I don't believe it's still online anymore. So this is kind of an alternative to it. And the way it works is that everybody, basically, you can submit your projects. You can see here's a bunch of projects. You can see this is my work in progress that I was putting up. And it works off an idea of that you put your own computer out there to render and you earn credits. And by doing so, when you go to render your projects, your position in the queue is based on how many credits you have. So at the moment, if I have a quick look here, you can see in my account at the moment, I have nearly 200,000 credits. And that's because I work, on my weekend and I will just leave this rendering in the background. SheepIt does seem to be pretty well behaved. When it crashes, it doesn't take down the whole machine. It generally says, hey, I've just taken down your window. And so it works really well. The actual client itself is, you can either do it as a web client, which I will show you, or you can download it and run it from the command line. It's deciding it's going to misbehave. Of course, it always misbehaves when I want to do something with the world, don't I? No, it's right. Okay, we'll come back to that.
We call that the demo effect. It always happens.
Yeah. And now it's completely frozen. Awesome. Okay.
No worries. You can keep talking about kind of how it works and
yeah,
know about it.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's going to restart. Okay. So basically, what happens? Yeah. So if you want to, just winning on tonight.
Oh man, yeah, it looks like it's having the good old demo effect.
Mm.
So how does SheepIt it work from a conceptual level, and what are some things to know about it? I guess aside from the fact that Java is a pain in the butt to use.
Yeah, so it does. Most of the time, it actually behaves really, really well. So if you want to render something, what we'll do is we'll add a new project. So we will add our text project. So we will browse to our text project. Where did we save it? Where did I save it? Let me remind me. Projects, promo, quick text. Okay. So promo. No. There it is. Okay. So why don't I have a blend file visible here?
Maybe Blender didn't.
Okay, I'll just save it as untitled again. There it is. Okay. And then you can just send that file up, and it's pretty small, so it shouldn't take long to send up over the interwebs. There we are. And you'll notice it has here, you should keep the render time under 20 minutes per frame. So, and when you put it up, you can actually see it's given us some warnings that we're missing some stuff in this case. Now that's the EXR that I looked at using, and then I decided against it. But it will warn you if you're missing textures and other bits and pieces. It won't warn you about things like circular dependencies that I mentioned before. That's pretty much it. So,
would you recommend packing files, or like how would you recommend getting?
You can do it either way. You can pack the file, or you can do it as a zip. So you can basically zip everything together. It's probably better to do it as a pack if possible, because you're less likely to miss something out of a zip. The other challenge is that the maximum size for this for a project in SheepIt is 500 meg. So if you've got a very large sort of like smoke sim or something like that, then SheepIt really is probably not the right place to start using this stuff. But for smaller simulations, it works fine. Again, as long as you remember to pack everything into the zip file. Otherwise, yeah, it's a bit of a mess. So it's all ready to go. We will add this job. So you'll see it's now been added. We'll go to administration. And now you can see that basically we are waiting. On the previous slide, it would have actually told me how long, what position in the queue that I am. So that's busy. Basically, we wait, and other people all around the world are now, potentially their machines are helping actually load it up and run it. Because at the moment, there's 190 connected clients. And you can see over the last few hours how many frames have been rendered by the farm. And over the lifetime, they've rendered, well, they're going to crack 10 million frames rendered in the near future. So it is a pretty solid, pretty good, except for tonight, obviously, tool that works really, really well. So I'll just go back to our job. There it is. And now it started rendering. And as you can see, the little green squares show you frames that have been completed. The blues are in progress, and you can see how it's all going. So it's actually ripping along quite well. The other aspect of this is basically SheepIt has the 20-minute limit. So unfortunately, what you'll find is I did my work in progress renderings here, but when I tried to do the final render, you get this message here. So you need to keep everything under 20 minutes on a quad-core machine, which is sort of like a standardish machine. There used to be a feature to actually split a frame into 4 components, but I haven't seen, I haven't been able to find that again. So I suspect they might have turned that off. The other thing is that even though our actual render should be pretty close to finished by now, well, there we are, it's finished. So there is another stage, which is where it has to actually build the frame archive. And that can take a long time. So, and for example, I think I did one of the work in progress, took 4 hours to render and 16 hours for the frame archive to be put together. So SheepIt is not great if you want to do a time critical solution, unfortunately. And then it has limitations around the size of files, the amount of render time, and so on. But it supports Blender internal. It supports cycles. It supports CPU and GPU. When you add the job, you can then tell it to use GPU as well. So that way it's actually quite flexible and it does a great little job. So we'll just get our frame archive.
Now it's kind of all over the place, right? But it's all CPU based. It's not GPU based, since
no, it can do either.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so if I'd send up a cycles job, you can tell it whether you want to use GPU and CPU or just GPU. So and that's with the work in progress ones that I did. I actually, with these ones, where are we? These ones, I actually used, you can see here, CPU and GPU.
Gotcha.
So you can see the two different devices here. So obviously for Blender internal, GPU is not available. But if you're using cycles, you can do it that way. And that's actually, one of the problems I had is when I just had it set to CPU, it was hitting the 20-minute limit. When I changed it to GPU, I believe that it calculates an average. So even though some of the plasma frames at the start were very slow to calculate, but the other ones at the end, people were knocking them over in 30 seconds. So I believe on average, it was working out to be under the 2-minute limit, so the 20-minute limit. And so that's why it was actually okay. So yeah, it's basically really a great little tool. I did a demo at Melbourne Blender Society a few months ago, and we just set up a project a bit like that. And I think it was going to take 5 or 6 hours to render on my machine, and we did it within an hour using SheepIt during the meeting. So it is a great little tool. It's also, it'd be great if you want to, as like I do, if I'm working on the weekend, just leave it running in the background, and so I happily render other people's stuff as well. And that way, when I come to render like this, like 700 frames, I'm #1 in the list. Generally, if you've got about 200,000 credits, you'll be 1, 2, or 3 in the list, so you don't have to wait too long. So, however, as you saw, when I came to do the final render, I ran into a problem, which is it was just killing. It was just not going to work under 20 minutes. So at that point, I had to turn to another solution, which was a commercial solution. And the commercial solution I chose was RenderStreet. Let me just get, where is it? Let me just bring it over. And here you can see what the RenderStreet interface looks like. So it's very similar. It gives you a list of all the different jobs that are coming up. Again, it's the same kind of thing where you basically upload a zip or a packed file. In my case, it's a packed file. Again, you can use GPU or CPU. And you can see how long it takes to do the frames. And even though they've got very, very chunky machines, so if we go to some of the end frames, where are we? Yep. like the last frames, it was knocking over in about a minute. So they were done very quickly. The early frames with all the plasma, now this potentially is just or the glass, one of them is driving at the time. I didn't have time to actually work out how to make better, cheaper glass. So, yeah. So the you can see at the front, it took quite a while to render them. The other thing is what it does when it starts rendering, it will generally render one frame, and then it will actually start doing the rest. So it will calculate an estimate off the first frame, which unfortunately leads to a couple of shocks. So you can see, but as you might be able to see there, I'll just try and zoom in. This was a screenshot I took when I kicked the job off, and it was just starting. So there is, no, it's not. This figure here, $1,826. At that point, I was about to cancel everything. So the thing is that because the initial frames were very heavy, that's why it took so long. That's why it was calculating that it was going to cost a fortune. The reality is it wasn't that bad. It did cost me a bit. So that's part of my contribution to World Blender Day. Where are we? And you can see that the, where are we? The notes, it doesn't actually have, the total build time, it was nearly 3 days of render hours. I kicked this off at 1 p.m. this afternoon. I had all the frames downloaded by 6:30. So in 5 hours, I did nearly 3 days of rendering.
And now, is that in USD or Australian dollars?
Unfortunately, that's in USD. So, yeah, our exchange rate's not great at the moment. But that's okay. It was worth it because it's very pretty. I'm very happy and very proud of it. So, the other thing is, again, big thanks to the guys at RenderStreet because we had a problem about 2 p.m. this afternoon. I hate to think what time it was in Europe, but they actually called me here in Australia and said, yep, and we'll fix it. And they fixed it. And I think they probably threw even more servers at it than they would normally, because at one stage it looked like they had about 30 frames rendering at once. So thank you very much to the guys at RenderStreet. They also did the recent Caminandes render as well. And I think coming up a bit later is the team from Quanot Computing, which is another render farm. And I'm pretty sure they did, I think they did Cosmos Laundromat, maybe. So, yeah, they, yeah. Yes, Qualism. Qualum said it's approximately $450 Australia. So, yes, that's my birthday money gone there. So,
nice.
Anyway, and welcome to Ton, who's joined us as well. So, there's two. I'll actually, how long have I got? I've got 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm running out of. I'll show you another because it's actually about. I think I found at least 16 or 17 different render farms available. That were basically out there. So Quanot's there, RenderStreet, there's Brenda Render, there's Ray Pump, which is cycles only, SheepIt, which is the only, I think SheepIt is the only really true free one. So, but I'll just show you another one which I actually quite like. Where is it? Now, I had to reinstall the client today, so hopefully it's going to work. And it's called Lion Sync. So what we'll do is, I'll just create the job here. Now, Lion Sync is a little bit different from the other ones because what it actually does is it keeps a live sync of your files with the server. So unlike SheepIt and the other ones where you actually have to upload your files, then render, this one has a constant syncing. So when you want to go to render, it's ready to go. And what we'll do, let's have a look. Yep, I think I haven't actually tried this file in a while. So again, this is called flying by the seat of your pants, but hopefully this will work and we'll see what happens. So we'll give you another demonstration. Yep. Give me the render back. Yep. There we are. Close. So there we are. So you can see it's actually started rendering already. So it's showing the peak. Oh, whoa.
This is interesting. A lot of this is just plug and play, right? You don't have to make any Linux-like things or know how all of that works, kind of like what Brenda does, right? Where you need a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a Brenda render, from what I've seen, actually seems to take a lot of work. But you can see it's ripping through. Now, there used to be a way, I don't know why they've changed it, but there used to be a way for actually, it was one of the really cool things about line render, it would actually show you the files as it rendered. And it would give you a list of all of the things that all the machines are actually going at it. Unfortunately, it looks like they've hidden them now, which is a shame. But you can see it's, how many have we got here? We've got, we're doing 576 samples, we're doing full HD, 101 frames, and it is just ripping through them. So Lion Render, I found, is that they've only just come out of beta, so they've had a few issues still, but they've obviously they do quite a bit of, they're doing a lot of work to make it really good. So hopefully we will get through any second now. There we are. So it's done. 101 frames in 1 minute 47 seconds for 8 cents. So hopefully I've actually got something. Oh, there we are. Ah, I've already synced, so it should have already synced. So that means if I look at, if I get that directory up, projects, where are we? Lion Render, Hank DOF, render results. There we are, that's all the files. So, no, maybe that's not it. Where is it? No, it's 2015. It's hidden somewhere, but you get the idea. So it will actually show you what you're doing and all of the actual items very quickly. So Lion Render uses a slightly different approach to the traditional upload approach that you get from somebody like RenderStreet. Yes, the final price may vary. That was a bit of a shocker. Where are we? Sorry. Yeah, so you get the final, this is an upload. The other feature that differentiates them a lot is that RenderStreet will actually allow you to FTP files as well. So if you are having real trouble using the web interface, so you can actually FTP to it. And I actually, when I did a flame simulation, which was a 1.5 gigabyte simulation file, I was really glad that I had that FTP option, because when I was using the web interface, it would get halfway through, it would drop out, and I'd have to go back to scratch. With the able to go to FTP, I could upload each individual simulation file, and if there was any problems, I could just restart that one. It wouldn't kill the whole upload. So it was RenderStreet offers you FTP. I don't think Lion Render does. SheepIt doesn't. The other thing is scripts. Lion Render is enabled by default. RenderStreet, you have to ask to turn them on, and SheepIt won't let you run scripts. So Again, if you're driving some animation or something, or you're doing something very funky, then it's a bit different. The different services cater to different situations. The other thing is RenderStreet's support has been magnificent. I don't want this to sound like an ad for them, but they have been really, really good. So they've been the best by far. So anyway, so that's why I'm not upset about giving them my money as well. That sort of covers off all the aspects of the different network renderers that I wanted to talk about. I'm out of things to talk about, believe it or not. I know that's a first. So any questions?
Just really quick, I know because the live stream might be a little tough to see the video, but I've gone ahead and uploaded your video to YouTube. And it looks really great. You won't get any choppiness or stuttering. So I just posted that in the chat, and I'll be tweeting that here in a moment.
Excellent.
Well, this has been an awesome presentation, man. Why don't we jump in and ask a couple of questions? So if anybody has questions, WBMD 2016. Or if you have any questions, you can also ask here in the chat. Tweet us, email us. You know, everybody knows what to do. Right off the bat, Andrew, let's say I'm a brand new Blender user, I'm brand new at all of this. What would you recommend as my first go ahead to get into cloud rendering? What was like the easiest, no hassle version of it?
Is it for network rendering or for
just cloud rendering, just to get my feet wet? Like, what if I don't know like that much about coding and stuff? I just want to try it out and see how it all works.
I'd definitely start with SheepIt, because SheepIt is, you know, it works really, really well. It's community, so you know it's got a really good feel to it. It also it's simple enough and it's reliable enough that you don't need to worry about if you make a mess of something. If you forget a texture, it's not the end of the world. If you've spent 10, 20, 30, 50 bucks on a commercial render and you get a purple frame back, that can really ruin your day. So that's one of the reasons why I did the promos here, like the work in progress on SheepIt before I committed to spending the money on a commercial render. But obviously, once you get to a certain point, you can't render on SheepIt because it's just burning too much CPU, GPU. You run into the sort of the time limits, or you run into other technical limits that I've mentioned. So that's, but for a starting person who's just doing their first sort of the equivalent of a hello world, then SheepIt is the way to go.
Awesome. It looks like there's a couple of questions in the chat here and a lot of great thanks and everything. So looks like you got a question here. I'll let you take it here.
Yeah. Any recommendations for render farms that you could run in your basement or unused machines? If you want my opinion is that the cloud-based render farms are getting to be so simple, so easy to use, and so reliable that I would have trouble. I wouldn't build my own render farm anymore. It's just the amount of effort I'd have to put into getting the hardware, the cost, the getting it all coordinated, put together, and if you're a techo, great, but I want to spend my life doing the art, not building the machines. So for me, I prefer to just use an online service if I can't render it myself. Which is, you can actually, if you really want to melt down your machine, run 2 instances of Blender, one doing GPU rendering and one with CPU rendering on the same frame, on the same project. And then I did that for about 3 days on one of my machines, and it was never the same again because it got so hot. So, couple other things is RenderStreet actually has a plugin for the interface for Blender. So it's simply, you know, basically hit render there. And they have an all-you-can-eat feature as well, where you pay $50 US a month and you can render as much as you like. You just put it at the back of the queue, is my understanding. So, okay, good question around security of Blender files when rendering for clients when confidentiality might be an issue. In the cases of the commercial farms, obviously they've got to protect that, so they will lock things down. So it's not, so it's all protected. Generally, only you can actually see what you've got rendered. Obviously, they can see it themselves, but it's in the commercial, it's quite well connected. With SheepIt, when you fire up the client and render, you can actually see what you rendered for somebody else. So in that case, SheepIt would not be a good solution if it's a commercially sensitive project, because it would be shown to other people in the world.
I want to chime into this one a little bit because this is a problem that we had as well. Right off the bat, people like RenderStreet and everything, there are agreements that you sign and everything that NDAs will carry between both parties. So that's right away something that's really handy. Another thing, because while we were rendering, even with that, we still weren't sure. So we broke things up into different layers. So things weren't hopefully as obvious as what they were. And then finally, in the case of one project, we ended up using Amazon and Brenda, doing it the hard way, learning Linux, Bash, all of that stuff. And Amazon is MPAA certified. Now Google is too, I believe. And that's a certification that means that any clients from the television or movie industry, if you render on Amazon or Google, it's been certified, so you can do it, so you don't have to do all of these crazy forms and everything. I mean, some clients will outright just completely ban cloud rendering, but thankfully at SIGGRAPH this past year in 2015, both Amazon and Google announced that they are MPAA certified, so we were able to render our projects in the cloud without trying to melt our own machines.
Cool. Excellent. So thank you for that, David. So yeah, hopefully, Paul, I hope that sort of covered off your question. What else have we got? Yeah, okay. No, looking for more questions. So
what would you think, now that you've kind of played with SheepIt quite a bit, what do you think of something like the credits thing is what I'm confused about. What do you think about that? Is that easy to kind of get used to? Am I, like, if I'm a brand new person there, am I going to be waiting in line a lot? Like, what's that kind of experience like?
Yeah, so the way the credit system works is that every time you render a frame for somebody else, you get, I think it's 14 credits plus a certain amount of how long it took. So, and every time you ask to render a file, it basically takes, I think, no, maybe it's, yeah, 7. It takes 7 credits plus an additional amount for the time as well. So initially, when I first started using it, yeah, it usually took 2, 3, 4 hours. It depended on the time and day before my render would start. But once I just left my machine running for a little while I was working on other things and started getting up about 50, 60, 70,000 credits positive, I then generally didn't have to wait very long at all. So, for example, when I was doing the promos, I was generally 1 or 2, and I've got about 200,000 credits. So if I left my machine on for 24 hours, I generally get about 10. I think I get about 10,000 credits on my machine, which is a 3-year-old, sort of like, it's a quad processor with I think a 540M GPU card, because you can tell SheepIt to use both your CPU and GPU. So it's, it's 3 years old. It's not, compared to what you can get now, it's starting to get a bit old. But yeah, I can usually get about between 10 and 12,000 credits per day if I just let it run. So over a couple of weeks of just sort of a couple of weekends of working with it working in the background, I've got to a point where whenever I throw a job on SheepIt, it starts pretty much within the first minute or two.
Have you ever found yourself with like a SheepIt render that's gone out of control, or maybe it's like killing like machines and everything? Like, has there ever been like, oh man, like,
well, that's part.
Like, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you do occasionally get jobs that stall, and you get jobs that crash for whatever reason. In that case, usually the client handles it pretty well. Little Java client, it will just shut down. It will just shut that job down, and then it gives you a little message saying, "Hey, I will try again in another 5 minutes." There's also a forum where people report projects that are causing problems. So it's that way anything that is problematical gets shut down by the administrator usually pretty quickly. But there was a number of, I think one of the entrants in the Suzanne Festival last year actually was done on SheepIt. So it's being used in semi-commercial aspects as well.
Yeah, that's great. I was reading up earlier that I think you even mentioned that they crossed 100 years of rendering this year.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I've seen some what is it, 8.3 million frames.
Yeah. So, well, they're over 9 million frames now, and they're heading up towards 10 million. So they're doing a great job, and the site's besides a few little hiccups tonight, is usually really solid, and works really, really well. So highly recommend it. Support them.
Awesome. Is there any issues in terms of like when you're rendering, like is it better to try to send a job out on a weekend or a weekday? What are like any tips and tricks on that side? Thanks.
I haven't found it does ebb and flow, definitely. So around certain times, I think when Europe comes online, it generally tends to go up. But as far as the number of connected clients, usually that's pretty solid. So if I just share it at the moment, if you have a look at it, you can see that when we started, it had about 190 clients on. So it usually averages somewhere around 200 clients worldwide. And as you can see, they've managed to knock out over the last few days. You can see there's sort of peaks and troughs, but it's generally, at the moment, the trend is down. I've seen people you're not supposed to put more than, I think it's a couple of thousand frames on, but I've seen people throw 70,000 frame animations in there on occasion. Usually they're very quick. Like about 3 or 4 months ago, there was an article around doing kaleidoscopes, and sort of like doing kaleidoscope animations, and there was a whole bunch of them thrown on there, rendered really quickly, but they were literally 30, 40,000 frames each, so they were quite large. But that's it. So again, once you get enough credits up, it really doesn't matter when you throw it on, somebody will start rendering it pretty quickly. And I hope that answers your question. And Qualism, you asked the question, was the entry Spinder floor? And the answer, I think, was no. It was the one with the fuzzy bug, from memory. I can't remember the name of it. I'm pretty sure that was the one. So,
how about RenderStreet? How does that, in terms of like complexity and everything, does that start to get a bit more complex, you would say, or is it pretty easy?
No, it's very similar. So it's, again, uses the idea that you package up your files as an FTP, as a zip or as a packed. You upload it, and then you set up a job. You connect the file to the blend file to it, and then you hit go button. It's very, very similar. Again, but the only thing, it doesn't have limitations, and that's because it's a commercial solution. So you can run your scripts, you can put up whatever. As I said, I put up a 1.5 gig simulation to it. They have support. So SheepIt, if something falls over, you're kind of on your own to try and work out. Soren from RenderStreet has, when earlier on I explained the problem we were having where I set something to track an object that was then constrained to the location of the object that was tracking it, and that caused the render farm on SheepIt to do something strange. I tried it on RenderStreet. It also did something strange. Soren actually investigated it, refunded my money, and gave me a solution. So, that's the difference between a commercial solution and the SheepIt as well. So, but it's fundamentally, they're very similar. It's really Lion Render, which is a little bit different as such. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, actually, you know what would be really helpful, I think, is could you write out all of these? I know you've kind of mentioned them, and I know we have like a lot of non-English speakers. So maybe could you you maybe using Blender just really fast, write out or just type it in the chat here so we can have like a list of different places.
Yep. What I might do that once I finish my session, because watching me type is probably not that exciting. So.
Well, I can. I actually have a couple little housekeeping bits I can talk about here while you write it up, if you'd like.
Okay, I'll do that because I actually have got a list of everything. So I'll go find that while you
do my bit. Sure. So I'm actually gonna share my screen here. Give me 1 second. And by the way, if I share the screen, and this is for everybody watching, if I share my screen and it's a little too big, it's actually very easy to minimize that so it's not so big. There's a little button at the top left, for me at least, might be the top right depending on your operating system. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully everybody can see this. Give it a second to think about. Andrew, let me know if you can or can't see this. Maybe.
It says it started screen sharing.
All right, let's give it one more shot. Okay, did that work?
Yep, that worked.
Cool. All right, so go find your list, and I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping here for a moment. So if you're just joining us and you have no idea what's going on, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are around the world. It's currently 4 in the morning for Florida, and it looks like we're looking at 1:48 in the morning for Los Angeles, 10:48 in Germany, and all the way to India, which is in the middle of the day. So right now, all of these times are in LA time, but you can easily just click these little links to find some similar time zones. We have India, Australia, and UTC. Right now, we are just finishing up with Andrew Buttery of Melbourne Blender Society. It's Melbourne, actually, right? You say Melbourne, not Melbourne, right?
Yeah, Melbourne. So
Melbourne. I'm always messing that up. Melbourne Blender Society doing a great talk on render farms, SheepIt, and everything else. Coming up in a few minutes here, in about 10 minutes, Andrew, Ton, and the whole gang from the Blender Institute will be holding a live Q&A. They've asked to use, and I'm going to find this down here, they've asked to use this website called blender.today. Again, that's blender.today, and it looks like there's a very easy way. You can just sign in with your Blender ID, Google or Facebook, and just quickly ask a question. This way they can kind of keep a track on what's been asked, and then if people want to go back to it, there's an easy way for people to find that. So again, that URL is http://blender.today. All right. Then you can also find that link down here. Ask a question. You can also tweet WBMD 2016, and we are watching that Twitter feed, so you can actually even follow along here on the side. We'll be watching that, answering questions, and sharing embarrassing photos of Andrew during his talk. So that is coming up here in a little bit, 2 a.m. with the Blender Institute Q&A. Afterwards, we're going to switch over to Quarnot Computing. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. That's a Paris group. They are a online render farm as well. They have a very unique way of rendering. They use your rendering files to heat other people's homes. It's kind of unique. Unfortunately, most of the team may not be able to join us, but they've sent over a great video, and we hope to have some of their reps online to take some questions. So that comes right after the Blender Institute. After that, at around 3:30 in the morning, Los Angeles time, we're going to be moving over to Dublin. Dublin is a brand new group, brand new Blender user group. They're going to be joining us. David McDermott is running the group. This is our first ever meetup too, so we're very excited to welcome them to the Blender community. They're going to be going over a brief overview of beginner features for Blender, how Blender's going, etc., etc. And then they'll be followed up by David Williams from the Dublin Users Group, who's going to be talking about Blender and the game industry. Very exciting. After that, we're going to be crossing the Atlantic, and it's going to be a wee bit dark at this point. Some people will be going to bed, some people will be in bed, some people will be awake and watching this live stream. If you're with me, awesome, love you, I'll be here with you. We have some great short films, we have some replays, we have some discussions. It's going to be a great little session here. We have a whole bunch of videos that a lot of the artists that could not present live sent us, and so we're going to be playing all of those one after another. Now, I admit we're going to be streaming them, and it may be a little choppy, but I'll be around to hopefully smooth things over. So that goes for about 3.5 hours, 3.5 hours, from 4 a.m. to 7:30. And again, this is Los Angeles time, and if you're just joining us, you can easily click this link and check out similar times for your time zones. Okay, so let's go back here. Right around 7:30, Sean Kennedy has a talk that we're going to be going over. He'll try to do it live, but if you can't do it live, we have a video backup, and he's going to be going over the Blender compositing improvements. Hey, Andrew, you've been asked.
Yo.
You have strong typing. We're just making fun of you, but can you mute your mic? Okay, cool, man. Sorry, there's sometimes the feedback happens. So anyways, Sean Kennedy, thank you very much, Andrew. Sean Kennedy, we're going to be going over, if he cannot do it live, we will have a video to show, and that's Blender compositing improvements. Sean's actually an old colleague of mine. We used to work at Rhythm and Hues. We worked on a couple of great movies. I don't have the poster behind me of R.I.P.D., but that's where we met, and in fact, it was Sean. Sean who taught me Blender, so he's to blame for all of this, for me getting into Blender. So we're going to be talking about Blender compositor improvements. After that, we're going to move over to Spain. I know we've crossed the Atlantic, but we're going to just jump back really quick. We're going to go to Oliver Villar of Blendtuts. Awesome, awesome tutorial site. Great guy to work with. And he's going to be talking about cycles for about an hour. Maybe a little bit more than an hour, but just about an hour, and that's going to be live at 8 a.m. on this live stream. Afterwards, we're going to be joined by the Blender Institute Part 2 Q&A, and that's going to happen again in Amsterdam, but this time it'll be a little bit later in the day, so those of you in North America and South America, Central America, you'll be able to join us. Hopefully you'll be awake, and our friends in Europe, it'll be a little late, but we'd love to have you. And I think at that point, Andrew will be completely passed out because what time is this at 9 a.m. for you? who knows? Maybe it's actually a pretty decent time. Oh no, it'll be 4 in the morning. I think Andrew will be. Afterwards, we're gonna switch over to the Los Angeles Blender group. This is where we're gonna do a little handoff. I here in Florida, Theory Animation, we're running the meeting all the way up until about 10. We'll do a handoff to Sterling Getz of LA.Blend, my co-host in this World Blender Meetup event, and they're going to have an awesome series of sessions. I'm actually a little sad that I'm going to miss some of these. They're going to be talking about VR, 360, game creation. It's a whole host of things, and it's going to be just a rad presentation. We're going to jockey around a little bit. In fact, this is probably going to be the heavier side of the day between 10 a.m. all the way to 6 p.m. Los Angeles time. We're going to be joined by everyone from Raleigh, North Carolina. We have Seattle. We have Vancouver, San Francisco, Stamford, Connecticut, and Los Angeles. So it's going to be a nice back and forth amongst a ton of really great artists and a ton of really great presentations. You can see them all right here. And Minnesota. I'm so sorry I missed you. Minnesota will also be joining us. So very, very exciting. I hope everyone can follow along. I know this is about 18 hours of Blender talk, so I imagine it'll be quite a while. Don't worry though, after we catch up on sleep and drink a lot, we will most likely upload all of this stuff within a week. We like to try to keep it pretty tight. There are a couple of people who are presenting things that are NDA blocked, so we may not be able to upload the entire thing, but for the most part, we're going to be uploading everything that we can, and that will happen, like I said, about a week or so. Give us a little bit of time to kind of catch up. This file itself is going to probably be massive. We've dedicated 2 terabytes to this thing, but who knows how long 18 hours of video will be. Anyways, that's kind of the wrap up here. Andrew, I'm going to kick it back to you. You got a couple of minutes left before we hand it off to the Blender Institute. Why don't you give us some talk about stuff?
Yep, I found my list of all the Blender rendering services I've found to date. So hopefully, where are we? You should be able to see my. I need to actually hit the share screen button. So you should be able to see my list here. So obviously, SheepIt. There's
still loading.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go. Okay, you're good to go, man.
Yep. Go for it. So under free, we've got SheepIt. We've got Ray Pump, which is cycles only. Yeah, it does, if I remember correctly, it used to sell itself as free, but it puts a watermark on your actual render from memory. So I don't know if they're still doing that, but you can get credits and so on, but yeah, it's not as free as SheepIt, shall we say. RenderStreet, we've already talked about a lot today. Quanot, generally most of the commercial ones will give you a freebie to start with. So RenderStreet has $25 to start with. Quanot has 25 hours, I think it is. That might have changed. This was done a little while ago. Line Render, I showed. Again, I'm pretty sure they give you at least $20 to start with. RenderStorm, I haven't looked at. I start getting to the ones I haven't looked at as much. So RenderStorm. Blender Render you use, don't you, David?
Sorry, it's muted. Yes, actually, we've used Blender Render, and I'll just say right off the bat, you must be comfortable with Linux, maybe a wee bit of programming there, just to be comfortable with how bash and everything works. Because Blender Render is great, just requires a little bit more advanced knowledge.
Yeah. We've got another one, Blender Grid, Render Flow. As mentioned, I think renderfarm.fi I think is dead, unfortunately, and I've heard rumors that Zinc, which is I think was bought by Google, is going to support it as well, support Blender, and there may be more. Just before I go, I'm nearly out of time. I did actually find the animation that I rendered with Lion Render, so I might just finish up with that. And so here it is. Some of you might recognize a character from a long time ago. And with that, we will say goodbye from Melbourne.